Hey everybody, it's Tammy from Good Gift, and this is the Good Gift of Reading. So I'm going to explain why the science of reading, which is the new way or the new method that lots of schools have adopted for teaching reading, is different from a traditional phonics approach, which is what a lot of homeschool curriculums are made up of, teaching phonics, which is a great start. Phonics is very important. But I would think I could go into this and it would take days and days to explain it. So I'm just going to focus on one thing, and that is focusing on the sounds of words. So in a traditional phonics approach, yes, they do teach the sounds of words and then they practice with maybe a spelling list or something, but they don't really make the connection to it and they don't teach it explicitly or in a systematic way. For example, the long E sound. The long E sound says E. In a traditional phonics curriculum, they probably would put together a spelling list and a word list that had all the long E sounds. So we're focusing on the long sound of E. So here's your spelling list. And I know this looks familiar to a lot of you. This is if we're not going to see this a lot in public schools because they do balanced literacy. They don't even really do phonics or spelling. I'm talking about maybe a private school or even some of the Christian school curriculums. And phonics is great. And it's great that they're teaching this. And most kids can figure that out. But if you have dyslexia, it's a little harder because it's not done in a systematic, explicit way. And if you notice, so all these words, they all have that long E sound. We have Jeep, and we have eat, and we have Pete, and we have me, and we have baby, and we have defeat. You can hear that long E sound, but notice they're all spelled differently. So I outlined it for you. I circled the vowel team, the vowels or vowel team that made up the E sound. And if you notice, it's different in every single word. Not to mention, then they throw in a 2-syllable word down here. They might not have even been taught what that vowel says. They could have, maybe if they went in order, A and then E's next, okay? And then this one, and that's going to throw a kid off, especially a kid who's dyslexic, because they're going to be like, they both say E, but they're both spelled differently, and now they still have to memorize. So it defeats the purpose. Science of reading likes kids to make that connection, or students to make that connection to why a vowel, why letters say certain sounds. And the best way to teach that is not to teach by vowel sounds and then giving you a whole bunch of words that make that vowel sound, but by teaching by syllable type, because a syllable type dictates how a vowel is going to sound. All syllables have a pattern, and once they're recognized by the kids, if they can recognize the pattern, they will know the sound. You can't teach them all at once. Sometimes it's a 2-year process because as we get deeper into the syllable types, they become more advanced with more advanced skills, and you need prerequisite skills in order to learn each subsequent syllable type, kind of like math. Let's do reducing fractions, that specific skill. You cannot reduce a fraction unless you know your multiplication facts. And you cannot know multiplication facts unless you know how to add. So it kind of builds on each other. Same thing with syllable types. You have to know how the previous syllable type works and why it makes a vowel say what it means in order to understand this next syllable type. So I'm going to show you real quick so you can get my book, and my book explains it even more in detail. There are always exceptions. I want to just, this is a disclosure. All sounds and syllables have exceptions, and that's going to be discussed later, but I'm going to give you, what 90% of words, will follow the rules. Some don't. It makes English really hard because we're taking our English language from so many different languages and meshing them all together. So sometimes the rules are going to change. So we're going to stick with the straightforward approach because I know you're going to be thinking, oh, but I know that A sometimes says, it doesn't only say or A. Sometimes it says, what about in that case? Yes, we have an answer for that. And we cross that bridge when we come to it. So right now we're going to stick with the basics, and the easiest and most predominant syllable type in the English language is called a closed syllable. So a closed syllable, okay, I've written it in 2 different ways because when you first introduce this, so is a closed syllable. So I've written this two different ways because when you first introduce a closed syllable or anything to a child, a student, this works for all students. Doesn't matter if they're dyslexic or not, especially when they're young because they're more concrete. But if you have a child with dyslexia, this is so beneficial. You need to color code the consonants and the vowel because they're looking for a pattern. So in a closed syllable, the pattern, first of all, a closed syllable only has one vowel. So that has one vowel. And it's closed in. So we're only looking at what comes after the vowel. It doesn't matter what comes before it. We just colored it green because it's a consonant. But it doesn't matter because it's not going to change. It's what comes after. So you want to show the child, and you can even go a step further and make an overlay with a door, and you can close the door and put the T on the door. You know what I mean? And close it so that my O cannot walk off my board. Now we read from left to right, so we're going to walk from left to right. My O, it doesn't matter if my O goes in reverse. It doesn't matter. It's not going to change the vowel sound. But if it can't go forward, it's closed in by one or more consonants. It can be more because sometimes words ends in blends and digraphs, okay? One or more consonants, it's going to make the short sound. It's not going to say its name. So if a student can recognize that pattern, oh, it's closed in, that O is not going to say oh, it's going to say ah. The word is not. And to take it a step further and make it multisensory, okay, because science of reading stresses the importance of multisensory learning because we're using as many senses as we can, okay? So we're going to use our visual cues, our listening, and our tactile. So we're actually going to write and mark up that's a closed syllable. So we're going to underline the one syllable. Every syllable has to have a vowel in it, okay? So that's one syllable, one push of breath. If you say the word not, your chin goes one time. We don't teach clapping. How many times does your mouth open? Because every time you say a vowel sound, your mouth opens, okay? So that word not is a closed syllable, and we put that little brev. It's a symbol, the universal symbol that stands for a short vowel. It's in the dictionary. If you're looking for pronunciation keys, you will see that symbol called a brev, short, okay? So then what's really easy is teaching the next syllable type, which is an open syllable. Now you notice I still have my word not written here. That's a closed syllable. So when you teach the next syllable type, you always start with the previous syllable just to review. And they know that says not, and it's a closed syllable because the O goes ah because it's blocked in by the T. Watch what happens if I open the syllable. If I open it, it becomes a different word now. It says no. You can hear the O say its name because it's open. An open syllable has one vowel, and it's the last letter in the syllable, meaning nothing's blocking it in. Now you can have, later they're going to learn in multisyllabic words that there's going to be another, I'll just put, there's going to be another syllable like noble. That B is not blocking the O in because that's a separate syllable. And they're going to learn that. They're going to learn the rules of syllable division as well. So you got to get this in a one syllable concept first so that they master that. And then you can place it in a multisyllabic word and then they'll understand. Okay. So anyway, that says no because it's open. So we put a macron on top to show it's a universal sign. It's in the dictionary that shows that a vowel is long or says its name. And then you mark it as an open syllable with an O, okay? So that leads us to our third kind of syllable, which is a vowel consonant silent E, or a V-E for short, or you might have learned it as the magic E, okay? All three can be used simultaneously when you're teaching this, but the correct name is vowel consonant silent E. It's a pattern. Again, do you see the importance of the colors here? So we have our vowel, and then our consonant, and then our silent E. The only thing that remains the same is the silent E always stays as a silent E, but we always have to have a vowel. It can be any of the 5 vowels, and it always has to have a consonant here, and it makes that pattern, okay? And if the child recognizes that pattern, they know the vowel is going to say its name, and the E is not going to say anything. By putting the macron to say it says its name, slashing out the E because it's silent, and then they label it a vowel consonant E, okay? So that's the third kind. Now we're getting into the fourth kind of syllable, and it's getting a little harder. First graders still learn this syllable though. By first grade, they should be learning this. If a child has dyslexia, it might take a good 8 months to get to this syllable type, depending on the severity of the dyslexia. I want to say almost a year. I've been tutoring kids who have dyslexia for many years, and it's taken most kids about a year, unless they're, dyslexia is a spectrum. It's not a spectrum disorder, but it's on a spectrum. So you can have severe dyslexia, kind of average, classic, or a touch of it, and you just kind of need that phonics based learning, and you can go a little quicker. I find with my older kids, they tend to advance quicker because they've kind of figured out some of the rules and they can put it together. Younger kids, it's just very overwhelming for them, so it does take them longer. But anyway, that's another story for another day. So the next syllable, the fourth kind, is called an R control vowel. So you'll notice that even though R is a consonant, we are coloring it green because the R kind of controls what the vowel is going to say. So those vowels say nothing at all remotely close to the A or the A sound. Completely different. The R distorts the sound. So we have R, car, or, horn. Okay, easy enough for these two, but then it gets tricky because the rest, like her, like firm, and like turn, they all make the same sound. Now, reading it won't be a problem as long as you remember that those three make the same sound. It's the spelling that gets tricky. And again, I'll talk about spelling and spelling options in my book, and it'll go into more detail at that point. And then even more detail when I do a book specifically based on R control vowels. So this is where spelling options really come into play. There's a little bit in the previous syllable types, but it's really heavy right here, okay? Okay, now we're going to get into the fifth syllable type, which is your vowel digraph syllable. Now a digraph, di means two, graph means symbol, two symbols, two letters that make one sound. Okay, just like your consonant digraphs. CH makes one sound. Ch, PH makes one sound. Okay, we have vowel digraphs, and there are many more vowel digraphs than there are consonant digraphs. Okay, so, and those are tricky. So in old school phonics, they would usually teach a vowel team to say, oh, when two vowels go walking, the first one does the talking. Don't go there. Don't say that. It's not okay, and I'll show you why. It works here, Jeep. It works here, made. And it works here, key, because remember, sometimes Y is a vowel, okay? Look here, coin. That OI does not work like that. It just says oi, all right? Now, I know there is a difference. We have that's called the diphthong, actually, because it makes a different sound, but they've put all these teams together under one syllable type because they all kind of work the same way. They just make different sounds. Then we have AU says aw, so that says hall. Does not make a short or a long sound for either word, either letter. Then you've got this little pesky digraph that says three different things. It could say E, like eat. It could say like bread, or it could say A, like steak. So you tell a kid two vowels go walking, the first one does the talking, it's going to confuse them, especially a kid who has dyslexia, because they need things explicitly described to them. And yes, there are exceptions, and we do talk about exceptions, but this is not an exception. Okay, so that would even confuse them more. They're like, wait, it's not an exception. Why? It's not doing what it's supposed to. No, so we don't even go there, okay? Because we do have true exceptions to all these syllable types that I will get to, and I will describe in more depth again in my books that I will be releasing one at a time. I only have this overview release right now. Okay, so that leads us to the last syllable type called final stable, and we teach it last because you really can only teach it when you have taught multisyllabic words, because a final stable syllable is the last syllable in a word. Okay, so there's two kinds. This first kind is, if you notice, it has a consonant LE. Okay, so it's final because it comes last in a word, final, and it's stable because there's always something that's the same or constant. So in this case, it's the L and the silent E. Now, the reason why there's a silent E in there is because all syllables need a vowel. Doesn't make any noise, but we need to have a vowel in there for it to be considered a syllable. And it clearly is a syllable, table. We put a silent E in there, kind of like a placeholder, kind of like a zero in math is a place filler. I mean, that's how I equate it. But that's why there is a silent E in there. Okay, so that's your consonant, LE, which is one example of a final stable. And I'm going to show you another example of a final stable, which gets even more complex. Okay, there's different letter combinations, but I'm only going to show you 3. Okay, these are just letter combinations like motion, the Tion, Sion, and Sure. They're final. They're the last syllable in the word, and they make a specific sound. So they're stable, where they always make the same sound or close to it. So Tion goes shun, motion. Does everyone see we have an open syllable, final stable? Okay, your kids will know this. They know that it says mo because it's an open syllable, because the T starts a new syllable, the final stable. Then we have man, shun. Now, Sion can make 2 sounds. It says shun or jun, depending, like television or man shun, okay? So it's pretty stable. And then we have measure. Me, that's a vowel digraph syllable, and the EA says eh. Jur, there's your final stable syllable, and it says jur, okay? And it's always spelled the same, and it's last. So that is very advanced, very complex. And because sometimes we use these for suffixes and all that. So suffixes, prefixes, base words, that's a whole other animal, and we do incorporate them as we're teaching all of our syllable types, but we have to do it in a methodical way, teaching it explicitly, and we don't introduce them all at the same time. There's a rhyme and reason to everything. Again, I'm not going to overwhelm, but this is just a sampling of what Science of Reading or a dyslexic intervention program teaches. Recognizing syllable types by sight, color coding, okay? Seeing the pattern so that they understand what the vowel is going to say, because that's half the battle. So check out my book in the link below. It's going to be a good start for you to really understand. So if you're just a parent and your child is going for tutoring for dyslexia, if you have this book, it helps you to understand what your child is learning and why, so that when they ask you a question, if they're doing work or they're trying to carry it over and connect it to their school, you can help them. You know, they might get something that's more advanced that they haven't learned yet. So you can kind of explain to them, well, you're going to learn that soon, and you can kind of help them along, okay? Or you might have your child might be tutoring, and you might be a homeschool mom too, so you can reinforce what they're learning in tutoring by sticking with whatever syllable type they're on, and you can get practice worksheets and things like that are based on the syllable type that they're learning. Or if you're a teacher, okay, I know a lot of schools, public schools, dictate what you are allowed to teach and what you're not. Some are a little more flexible, especially if you are in special needs. If you have a child that that is struggling with reading, dyslexic or not, this strategy will really help them. So it's a good resource to have, and hopefully it really helps you and narrows it down. So it's just important to know this, you know, if you have a child who's struggling as a reader, and if your provider is using the same technique. Might not be delivered in the same order, but it might be called something different depending on the program, because there's several different programs. There's the it's usually the Orton-Gillingham approach. They were the first program that developed teaching kids to learn how to read using syllable types and marking up words and tapping them out. And then other programs developed out of that, but they kind of use the same methodology, the same structure, teaching by syllable type. Okay, so we have the Wilson reading system, which I am certified in, and we have the Barton system, which was written for homeschool moms. We have lots of different programs, but they're all based on Orton-Gillingham. They're all based on Science of Reading and teaching things in a systematic, explicit way. because if you have no rhyme or reason to this, it's just going to confuse the kids more. I mean, it's a good start that you're starting with phonics, but you need to deliver it in a way that's going to make sense to the kids, okay? And you have to go slow. They have to master it before they can get on to the next one, because if they haven't mastered it, it's just going to make it more frustrating for them, because then they're going to have to rely on practicing something they're not completely confident in, and then learning new information. And in the schools, they're going to go fast like that. So it's good to reinforce if they're home, or, once they have tutoring and things like that. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Please like me and subscribe so that you can hear more. I can give you, more tips and tricks. And check out my book. I do have an overview of dyslexia that is free. I'm going to put the link to that. It just it's more like a pamphlet. It's free just for you to see, be on the lookout if you suspect someone has dyslexia. And then I have my first book in the series, Understanding an Overview of Syllable Types, and that is for sale in the link if you click on it. So thank you so much, and comment below too if you have any questions.